Attached to the Bendix is a prerotator cable that runs down through the clutch. Today I will be showing you how to put together the clutch. First, a list of parts in the clutch assembly. 6008 DU bearing, steel pressure plate, compression spring, clutch body, clutch fork, key stock, pulley belt guide, spindle complete with square drive, prerotator extension, prerotator spring, complete clutch assembly, complete prerotator assembly.
First thing I'm going to do is install the brake pads onto the prerotator pulley. What you're going to find is a lot of the times on the riveter, this little end here needs to be machined down in order to get right inside the brake pad. Reason being is you want to ensure that that rivet is pushed all the way to the bottom of the brake pad before you rivet it on. These are installed using stainless steel rivets, like so. What I'm going to do here, I've already installed my brake pads onto this pulley. What I'm going to do is press a 6008 bearing into the back side of this pulley. I'm going to install my snap ring behind the bearing, and then I'm going to do is press the bearing onto the clutch body. With my bearing pressed in place, what you're going to notice is when the bearing is pressed all the way onto the clutch body, it should come to rest on a shoulder. Now on the bearing you can use red Loctite, but it really isn't necessary. Another thing we're going to do, you'll see there's 3 holes going through the pulley, and in behind you can see the bearing. These holes are used to knock the bearing out. But what we want to do is fill these holes full of silicone, because when this is rotating, a lot of the times you'll have a little bit of grease leak out of the bearing, and you really don't want that on these brake pads. So what I'm going to do now is just silicone those holes shut. Now what I'm going to do is just hold this in the vise. You'll find a 3/8 by 2 3/4 inch bolt with a hole drilled through it. What we'll do is install the nut all the way to the top of the thread, and this will be installed into the clutch body in a 3/8 tapped hole near the pulley. Turn this most of the way in. I'll line the drilled hole going this direction lengthways with the clutch body and lock it in place with the nut. Next thing I'm going to do is install the clutch fork. You'll see a rounded portion on the front end of the clutch fork. This will go towards the pulley. It's installed using a AN3 23A bolt. I'll place 2 washers under the head of the bolt. The clutch fork will go inside the machined hole into the clutch body. And I will place a washer under the head of the nut. I'll tighten this down only until the nut comes against the side of the clutch body. The next thing I'll do is through the prerotator pulley, I'll insert into the clutch body an R8 bearing. That'll push into place. select the prerotator spindle. I'll slide a bearing onto the shaft, and behind it I'll put a 3/4 inch washer and insert that into the clutch body from behind through the bearing in the front. I'll then take a 1/2 inch washer and place it over top of the shaft against the bearing. Take my spring provided, give it a stretch so it's approximately 3 inches long. Push that against the washer. I'll next take my pressure plate. You notice there's a keyed hole in the pressure plate. A good idea on the pressure plate is to take and rough the surface. This will prevent any glazing from the brake pads. Place my pressure plate onto the shaft. This may require a light tap with a hammer. I'll grab my fiber hammer. Light tapping is generally required to get that to line on. I'll then take my piece of key stock, place it on the shaft, and tap it into the pressure plate with a punch. Tap it only in far enough that I can get 2 washers and a castle nut started. 3/8 drive ratchet will fit into the back of the spindle, and just go ahead, and what I'll do is turn this nut in as far as it'll go, locking the pressure plate to the brake pads, and then what I'll do is back it off until I've got a small air gap between the brake pads and the pressure plate. You want to keep this as close as you can, but still have a small air gap so that the pressure plate is not actually contacting the brake pads. From here, what I'll do is I'll line a castle of the nut with the slot I've run the key stock in, and what I'll do is drill a 1/8 hole so that this nut can be pinned in position. I'll then insert a cotter pin and bend the tangs in either direction. The pressure plate and shaft should rotate. When the fork is engaged, it should engage to the pulley, and both should rotate. We'll then do select our cable adjuster and a spring. This spring will need to be bent forward and up. What I'll do is give this end a small squash, so it looks like so. I'll insert my cable adjuster from this side and turn that into the clutch fork. I'll thread it in all the way. Adjustments will be made later. We'll then select a 1/4 by 1 inch bolt. A nut will be threaded onto the bolt. And this bolt will be threaded into a tapped hole in our prerotator extension. I'll turn the bolt in just so it starts to come through on the inside, and lock it in place with the nut just so the bolt does not come loose and get lost. This is placed over top of the back of the spindle and in the back of the clutch body. Take a 1/4 by 2 inch bolt, and in the back of the clutch body there's a hole. What you'll have to do is pull the return spring on the clutch fork back as to pin the spring with the bolt. You may have to just pull your extension out in order to get this started. Pop back in place. A washer under the head of the nut only here. And what I'll do is just tighten this nut down just tight enough that it stays in place so it's there when you go to mount it. That's the prerotator extension can't come loose.